So in this episode, I talked to Rich about conscience, what it is and where it comes from, and why embracing it is a key to your spiritual advancement. Hello, welcome back to the Spiritual Freedom Show. My name is Darren Ball, and this is the podcast helping you to awaken your chakras, unlock your psychic powers, and to discover true spirituality. Have you ever wrestled with that inner voice telling you to stop, or speak up, or take a different path, only to ignore it and then just feel the weight of regret afterwards? We all have. And the key is listening to our conscience. So in this episode, you'll learn how to distinguish between conditioned guilt, which you want to ignore, and the true prompting of the inner voice of your own higher self. You'll also learn about the relationship between embracing your conscience and releasing your inner spiritual blockages, because it's not about wallowing and feeling bad about something, it's about raising your consciousness. And finally, we'll talk about what to do when past actions from this life or previous life resurface for healing and transformation. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to hit that bell so you don't miss any future conversations between Richard and myself diving deep into true spirituality.
Richard.
Darren.
So I think we have an interesting show today about conscience.
Conscience. Yeah.
I think everyone watching or listening to this can probably relate to what a guilty conscience feels like.
Yeah.
You know, when you know that whatever you're doing is a bit wrong, maybe, and there's a part of you that's telling you to stop or turn around or walk away or say something or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Act. But for whatever reason you don't, and then you're left with this sense of maybe inner discord or sort of regret or maybe betrayal or maybe even a sense of inauthenticity. You know, I've certainly felt something like that in the past. So I wanted to dig into this topic of conscience, and maybe we start with what is conscience anyway? You know, is this just like a social, cultural thing, or is this something innate within us that we feel?
It's innate within us, for sure. And it's blocked out often by conditioning. And then likewise, there is a sort of guilt often which comes from conditioning, which isn't true conscience. So it's,
it's
I'm not trying to be complicated here, but a lot of people, they're brought up in a certain culture where they're made to feel they have to do this, they have to do that, they have to do the other, and they don't do it. I think we've all experienced that. And because they don't do what's expected of them, they feel guilty about it. They feel they're letting down their family, their country, their whatever. And these things may or may not be correct. And so conscience, true conscience, is above that. And true conscience comes from the higher self. It's something we should venerate. And all too often we don't. And I myself have made that mistake multiple times over the years of just kind of, it's a bit like intuition. People say so often, I had a feeling about that, but I didn't do anything about it.
I see. Yeah.
You know, they're both coming from the higher self, intuition and conscience. And conscience, I'm afraid, can be a painful thing if we really allow it to, to express itself. But what it will do, and it's quite simple, really, I think. It's not easy at all, but it's quite simple, is accept it. When it's really coming from our own higher self, when it's not an imposed guilt feeling as a result of some social conditioning of some kind.
Well, just on that point, I mean, how would someone better tell the difference between those two things?
It's a fair question, and if you don't know, that's fine too. That's okay. It means you haven't. If you don't know, then you're not really experiencing conscience, for sure. Or let's put it another way. You're not experiencing it surely enough. A bit like intuition. I think the rules apply to both equally, really. Because if you get an intuitive prompting, I should do this, that, and the other, and you're not sure whether it's your imagination or your intuition, then only follow it if it's completely safe to do so. I'm not suggesting you take risks or you do anything foolish at all if you're not sure. But there'll come a time, through actually experience is the answer to your question, when you'll see, actually, yes, that was my intuition. I'll give a silly example, which I often give. If you're walking down a street, you get a real feeling, I need to go off this street. You've got no reason to go down there. But you go down there, and down there you bump into someone you've been looking for, perhaps for years. And there they are. And you think, right, that was intuition.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you go down there, nothing happens, it all fades to nothing, and you think that was just a stupid imaginary thought. No harm is done, because you had the time, you haven't taken any risks, fine. But you're learning.
Yeah.
And it's the same with conscience. If you're not sure, weigh it up. Very often, and one thing I wouldn't throw out is intelligence. Intelligence is vital. And some spiritual people don't use it, to analyze. If you're not sure, okay, you can't work it out, then you've got a prompting. Okay, the prompting comes first, then analyze it.
Okay.
Like, for example, in my case, particularly since I've had some more enlightened experiences, some memories of things from decades ago come flooding back to me. Sometimes bang, 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 different incidents, all of them describing the same kind of wrong behavior on my part.
Interesting.
Yeah. They'll come sometimes like 5 of them. Bang, 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 bang. 5 different memories, all illustrating the same point.
Wow.
Now, what I think there, what you need to do then is just recognize it. It means you haven't recognized the error of your ways.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you can do something about it, then great. But usually you can't. Usually it's come and it's gone.
Yeah.
But you can you can determine how you're going to behave in future.
Yeah, going forward.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
But more than that, these are blockages in your chakras, in your nadis.
Yeah, it's very
because
interesting.
You have blocked off higher thought. By ignoring your conscience, you've harmed yourself. You've harmed yourself because you've blocked off higher impulse. If you block off higher impulse of conscience, which is only there to teach, it's only there to help. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. You've blocked that off. You've blocked off your intuition as well. You've blocked off a fuller opening of a higher chakra. You've blocked off a more complete rise of Kundalini at some point.
I love this metaphysical view on it because it makes it really concrete as to what's actually happening within us as it relates to our spiritual evolution.
Yeah. So you need to unblock it, and sometimes in the unblocking procedure, these things will come back to you. Now, you don't need to remember every bad thing you've ever done. You can go back into past lives. I mean, the Master Chang Fu, who's a great Tibetan master who spoke through Dr. King, who, by the way, is not ascended, but I believe he will be in his next life. He's only got 1 life left, as I understand it. He's a very advanced master, a very wise master, talks in a very colloquial, chatty, kind of friendly way, but behind that lies great truth. And he was asked a question by somebody in the audience about why it is we don't remember our past lives. And his answer that he gave in a very sort of understanding, chatty manner to this lady was along the lines of, well, we have done some rather bad things and it wouldn't be very pleasant, something along those lines. But behind that lies a lot of truth. It can be very unpleasant. So people who remember their past lives, and if they really do remember them, and often they don't really remember them, they might remember, they might remember the court of Queen Elizabeth. It doesn't mean they were Queen Elizabeth. Yeah. They might have been the cook.
Let's be humble about it.
But that's what people tend to do. They associate it with something. But nevertheless, if you do really remember your past lives properly, again, your conscience will prick you. Again, you will have to face up not just to the good that you might have done, which can encourage you tremendously and show you, okay, I'm capable of that, therefore I can do this, and this is helpful.
True.
But it can also show you, and should show you, the error of your ways, which you are here now to correct.
I think what's interesting about that is, as you say, that can happen from your past life insight, but being able to look in this current life and begin to recognize and accept things.
Absolutely, you don't need
as you
to
described
remember
in your
past
first
lives.
example.
No. Yeah, it's true.
There's enough mistakes we've made now.
Yeah.
That we go.
And again, you don't need to remember everything you've done wrong. What you do need to do is unblock. It's bad to, sometimes people will suppress evil instincts or bad behavior instincts or whatever you might call it. It could even be anything from greed.
Okay.
And I mustn't eat this. I really, all the way through to, misbehavior of various kinds.
Yeah.
And sometimes somebody will be strong-willed enough to resist it. Now, they haven't always completely transmuted that bad thought. Let's hope they have. There's a wonderful, on my workshops, actually in Realize Your Inner Potential, there's a wonderful practice in there called the mental hand practice. In the book, Realize Your Inner Potential, which is a goldmine of spirituality.
Definitely.
I say that as a co-author, But I say that because the credit goes to Dr. King, not to me. It's his book. I was honored to co-author it with him. And this will tell you how to actually transmute the thoughts. But often we're going through life, we're doing perhaps the right thing, and we're suppressing to some degree the bad thing. And you have to do that sometimes. But it's still there. So that kind of suppression is not so serious, actually. It will have to be dealt with. It will come back until you actually transmute it and you think, actually, I don't even want to eat that, or I don't even want to harm that. Now, why would I want to do that? That would be, you don't think that way anymore, and
totally.
that will happen.
Yeah.
Now, that's one kind of suppression. But the more deadly kind of suppression, I've said before, people should talk about soul repression. That's what we're talking about here when we're talking about the conscience. That's where it goes to in the end.
Totally.
The higher self. Suppressing that is to limit us. It's why we're so limited. It's why, human beings spend their whole life aware of the suffering in the world, and I'm sorry, a lot of people not doing nearly what they could do, even if it was through prayer, about it. There are people who are atheists. I regard that, and I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this or not, but I regard that as a mental health condition.
Why would you say that?
I say that because they don't know.
Whether there's God or not.
An atheist, by the way, being a person who says there is no God. Absolutely, definitely, there is no God. They don't know. They don't even know what God is. They might have come across a particular religion.
True.
And they might be saying that religion is wrong. But they don't know there's no God. And yet they say there is no God.
Yeah.
So they're deluded because they think they know something they don't.
It's a typical straw man, isn't it? They're taking God as sort of portrayed in a certain religion, which might be extremely limited concept anyway.
It might be.
And one that, even someone with a deeper realization would be like, no, it's not that. It's something
to get the full description of what God is, if you want to know, there's no finer description of what God is than in that book, the 12 blessings, in the 12th blessing. And yes, there are very limited descriptions of God in I believe, in certain religions. I would agree with that point, but I'm just only illustrating that because their conscience, even of that person, it might be very dim, will be prompting them to say there is God. Because they are God. God is within them, and they're blocking it off. Now, I don't talk about agnostics. I want to be clear here. People say, I don't know. I'm open-minded.
Sure, that's different.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I have doubts. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a dogmatic statement. And this is a dangerous thing because it's soul repression. And soul repression is the reason why people don't have higher powers. They block off the higher powers. And likewise, if people don't do anything at all about anybody other than perhaps their own family, maybe their local community, maybe their own country only. The limits are placed upon their service.
Yeah.
Their conscience is saying to them, we're all one. Because we are all one. And not just people, all life, animals, plant life. We're all one.
I think to your point, there's a lot of systems of morality around the world, particularly in religions has been offered. And just in the context of what you've just said, it's almost like a stopgap measure because we have not more deeply realized this oneness that you're talking about. And if we had, all this wrong behavior it wouldn't arise naturally in the way that it does. It's like the system of morality is almost like this sort of cultural norms and conditionings that keep us from doing these wrong things. But it's almost, we're sort of like trying to suppress the bad thoughts and stuff rather than transmuting them in a greater realization of what we really are.
Yeah, you can see an easy example with homosexuality, just as an example of social conditioning, no more, no less. That's all I'm talking about. Go back 100 years, you would be regarded by most people in the West as morally wrong if you endorsed and accepted homosexuality as a good thing. Today, in many places in the West,
opposite, isn't it?
You would be regarded as morally wrong if you didn't accept it. So those are two social positions
on the same issue.
On that particular issue. You could take any issue.
Sure. Yeah.
And so this isn't the guideline. The guideline is your inner conscience.
So that, to illustrate that, if it can't be wavering all the time, that's obviously a man-made position rather than a greater realization of.
Yeah, and there are man-made positions in different cultures. And some cultures, it was honorable to commit suicide under certain conditions, and in others, it's not. And you get all these are cultural things. You could think of a whole lot of examples. But in the end, though, the good news is we have something above cultural norms, something above social conditioning, something even above intellectual moral codes, which is our higher self prompting us. And that's what I'm referring to when I refer to conscience, an inner knowing and a sudden recognition, which can be painful. Now, it can be so painful, particularly if you're still engaged in certain forms of wrong behavior, to face it. And so people block it out. I think we've all done it. I've done it. And you can look back and you think, gosh, why did I do that? It's kind of instinctive in the terrestrial makeup. I don't think it's instinctive. It isn't instinctive in an advanced person to do that. But you have to face what you've done. But I'll tell you a strange thing, though. I have found, even while doing that, in the midst of a very uncomfortable feeling of regret and facing up to it, you can feel at the same time tremendous peace.
Like a relief or a...
Relief and a great peace enfolding you. And all you have to do, as I say, it's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple, is say, right, that I did there was wrong. And to yourself, if to nobody else, to yourself, it may not always be helpful to tell anybody else.
Right.
Because their motive may not be right.
Sure.
As St. Peter found when he was asked, are you a follower of Jesus? When the cock crowed 3 times, those who know the story, and he denied it. He was right to deny it. He told a lie, you could say. But if he hadn't done, he'd have been dead. If he had been dead, he couldn't have completed his mission.
Totally.
So that's an extreme example. But, whether you can tell people, that's a different matter. But you mustn't lie to yourself.
Oh, I think it's really helpful because at the end of the day, like you're saying, you need to be able to recognize and accept the truth yourself within you. Because if you don't, it sounds like the blockages will remain within you because you're not allowing yourself to see what that really was and to learn the lesson of it and to move forward with the strength that no, that was wrong. I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah. And if you are in doubt, you say, look, I've got a feeling this was wrong, but I don't know. Analyze it. Well, what was it? Was it good? Is it fair on everybody? Was it right? Was it, and you'll soon get there, but the logic should be applied to meditation, said the ancient yogis. Intellect should be applied to higher promptings, not the other way around. As above, so below, by the way, but not as below, so above. So the higher aspects of consciousness flow down from the higher chakras downwards if you allow them to and permeate the lower ones. The lower aspects of consciousness won't of themselves rise. Hence the whole path of raising Kundalini and the effort that's required to do so.
One thing also that I just reflecting, like applying this to the spiritual path and the search, that people may be on, is that yes, there are a lot of cultural norms and conditioning about what you should do with your life and the expectations and what, the path that we're expected to follow and all that in terms of, material success. And you can have sort of that conditioning going on in your mind and sort of pressuring you and almost calling you sudden guilt. But then at some point, the growing awareness of your own conscience, your own higher self begins to override that to the point where you start to hear that in the back of your mind as well and think, actually, it's not these norms and this conditioning and these expectations that I really need to be listening to. It's actually this voice now that I can begin to hear in the back of my mind.
Indeed, because when it comes to, so let's take personal wealth as an example. I have met people who are wealthy, who are proud of being wealthy as a thing. And I've met people who are wealthy who are ashamed of being wealthy as well.
Interesting.
And neither is that useful. What if they aren't going to do anything about it?
Yeah, if they aren't going to do anything about it, exactly.
The thing is, how am I going to use this wealth? And can it be used for the greater good of all? And that's all that matters about it. If your motive is anything other than that, then that's where you might need to turn to your conscience.
Well, it's a very interesting point that you made about the usefulness of shame or guilt. Like, at some point, if you're not doing anything, then what, then...
Don't want to wallow in it. And also there is, as we said at the right beginning, superfluous guilt. There are things that are put upon us for which we should not feel guilty, which we're made to feel guilty for. And, there's a very simple thing, and this is where the new teachings supersede and absolutely trump all the ancient teachings, which is, how can I do the greatest good for the whole? And that is completely in tune with the highest realization you can have. It's in tune with cosmic consciousness. It's in tune with samadhi. It's a oneness for all life. And that's what should motivate us. And everything else, all the other moral steps and things might be valid, but they'll never be as great as that one.
I love the point you're making there, because a lot of people talk about, soul purpose and being in line with their soul. And ultimately, that is the ultimate alignment with our soul we are talking about there.
It is.
And everything else is sort of a degree of misalignment, which we may or may not be aware of. But we will grow in awareness of that as we develop on our spiritual path and in our evolution, and begin to feel the discord between service to all and whatever we might be doing at that point.
Very well put.
Is there anything you would say, kind of in closing here, about, is it always best to follow our inner prompting? Is there ever a case where,
It's always best to follow our inner prompting. Always. Providing it is our inner prompting. It's always best. Yes, absolutely. No ifs, no buts, no compromise, as long as it is our inner prompting. The inner voice is never wrong. The still small voice of intuition, of conscience, is never wrong as long as it's real. Sometimes you don't know, as we said earlier. That's a different matter. Then you maybe you won't follow it. You'll consider it. You'll meditate on it, or you'll analyze it, or test it, or what have you. But if you have an inner prompting, it's not like a psychic power. That could be wrong.
Right.
That could be misused. You could gain power over others, for example, using psychic powers, which would be wrong. You could be controlling of others. That would be wrong. There's things you can do with psychic powers that aren't necessarily right. But the intuition, the real inner voice, our connection with our soul, our connection with our higher self, is always, but always right.
Thank you very much, Richard.
The first point I think we can take away there is that true conscience comes from the higher self. Conscience isn't just something that's passed down through culture over many generations. It's not just a cultural artifact. It comes from within us. It's an intuitive prompting from our own higher self. And unlike social conditioning, which changes with time and with place, genuine conscience is timeless and is an expression of universal truth. Now, the other key point is that suppressing our consciousness blocks our spiritual progress. Ignoring our conscience not only creates this inner discord with the guilt or the regret that we feel, but it also blocks our access to our own guidance and even to Kundalini awakening. But facing past mistakes, even painful ones, helps to dissolve these blockages and elevate our consciousness. And as an extension of that, regret can be a doorway to peace. When we honestly acknowledge our past mistakes without judgment and allow that process of inner healing to take place. And this self-awareness is an essential step on our journey through evolution and to aligning more fully with our soul. And in the beginning, of course, it's hard to know whether you're really hearing the voice of your inner self or some other narrative or dialogue that's happening inside of your own head based on your likes or dislikes or fears or aversions of certain things. But the good news is that still small voice within you is always right. It's just that we need to learn how to tune into it. And the final point I'd like to make as a takeaway from the show is that service to all is the highest moral compass we can have, because it is an expression of our realization of the oneness of all things in creation. The ultimate expression of our conscience is the desire to do this greatest good for all, and that is higher than any man-made code or societal expectation, and it's the path to cosmic consciousness and to oneness with all life. Now, if you enjoyed that episode about embracing your conscience, then check out this video over here about unblocking your chakras, or this video over here that goes deeper into overcoming fear. Thanks for tuning into the show. We'll see you next time.